Welcome back to the Sega Youth Forum, and we're fast approaching the end of day one. Day two has all kinds of exciting panels, but two things to mark your card about. Paul Elliott, who is the chair of the FA's Inclusion Advisory Board and is in the mix to be FA chair as well, replacing Greg Clark. He'll be talking to us on one panel, and we will hear from the only clean Russian athlete at Rio 2016, Daria Klishina. Fascinating fireside chat, albeit without the fire, with her. That's coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned and follow our social media, because we'll be leaking you a few little teaser clips over the course of the next 24 hours. It's been a really exciting day, though, as we've heard from some established talents already shining in the sporting and integrity industry, and young talent as well from the Sega Youth Council, who are such a big part of these 2 days. And we've got two sessions to bring you before we wrap up for day one. So to mark your card, our final session is the second special session of the day. It's called Do You Want to Work in Sport? How to Get Ahead of the Game. So that has all kinds of career advice for the younger talent. And before that, we're also going to be focusing on HR and recruitment. And coming up now, this panel is called Careers in Sport Integrity, opening the door to the next generation. On this panel, we have Asen, Ole and Ed to give you three different perspectives, and this one is moderated by one of our favorite people here at Sega, involved in so many of our conferences and a great moderator as well. That of course is Graziella, and I will hand you over to her now to moderate our penultimate panel. Graziella, a very good afternoon or evening to you. Really looking forward to this one. Over to you.
Oh, it's a good morning for me, for goodness sakes. It's sitting at 4 a.m. here on the Gold Coast, and I'm sitting in this wonderful sunshine that's about to start to rise over a beach. And I'm talking with Norway, I'm talking with London, and I'm talking with a strawberry field over there. And I'm going to start with this fantastic panel. What a warm handshake we've had. So Ed Bowers, who is very esteemed sitting there in our panel, is sitting in a strawberry field. He is a very experienced commentator, and I almost feel a little bit humble being on the other end of the mic, able to lead and take him through the questions today. Ed, you are incredible. Your background's fantastic. You're young, you're dynamic, you've done so much. We've got a big topic to tackle, and wow, the talent pack we've got there. So it's a hello from Ed.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
Fantastic. And also I've got down here, sitting on the right and left hand side of my panel, I've got someone sitting in the cold of Norway talking about snow while I sit here in this basking sunshine of 36 degrees. I have to say, Ole, some of that background that I was reading about you and in understanding what you're doing in that whole sort of sport recruitment and advisory space is going to be just invaluable for our panel, and also invaluable for our audience, because we want to break some ground and give everyone those tips to take away to ensure that there's a warm handshake into any career that you wish to get into in this area. Ole, very, very nice to see you there.
Likewise, and thank you so much for being part of the panel. I'm excited to contribute and hopefully share some good knowledge here.
Fantastic. Looking forward to your history, also studying in the USA and how that came about as well as we go through the panel. Essen, it is fantastic to see you in your London office there, looking at you and saying, wow, you're one of my favorite places in the world. You have equally got such an impressive career background. You know, you have really struck a chord in looking at what you've been doing with media. You've led over 100 different, connections that you've had to agencies internationally and what you've been doing with media. And one of the things I kind of look at, in your history, your work in both media and sport integrity, is the way that you've carried out your work and how you've actually advanced your career so quickly at such a young age. And I think those tips are going to be so handy for our audience. Really lovely to have you on board today, Essen.
Yeah, no, likewise. Thanks for the intro, and pleasure to be part of this panel with the other guys.
Fantastic.
Here right
and
now.
Without further ado, what I do need to say for our audience is we are in so many different parts of the world. Occasionally you're going to find If there is any audio issue and our Wi-Fi lets us down, be aware that you can come back to this fantastic recording and listen to it again if you miss any tidbits, or reach out to our panel at any particular stage. Now, without further ado, I'm going to get into tackling our panel and really tackling them so that we can make your life a little bit easier as an audience. Because finding your ideal career or your background, of being able to get through hurdles can affect the direction we take. And what we want to do with you today is acknowledge, number one, we are in a global pandemic, but maybe there are some opportunities in that. Maybe in this pandemic, we can
Still on your mute.
So we've had our first issue there with a fallout, unfortunately. So let me just go back into that warm handshake. So for our audience, finding your ideal career is by no means an easy feat. And I remember at 14, 15, I was fortunate. I kind of knew where I wanted to go. Things fell into place. It didn't always fall into place. I had to ask those hard questions. And I guess if we look at this defining area and we look at the topic itself, finding your career, making sure you know that the role that you want is accessible to you, we want to remove the barriers. And this panel is a guide to identifying and finding your ideal role. We want you as an audience to make sure that you can remove the barrier, reach out to us, reach out to anybody, and know that there are 5 easy steps to take. And hopefully through the questions we asked today, we're going to give you 5 easy steps to taking those steps that you want to open some doorways and to not take a cold start, but a warm start in the direction that you're dreaming of. Now, sport integrity is an interesting area because it's a pioneering kind of area. And we all have dreams of things that we want to head towards. And what I'd like to do is first recognize that, in this global pandemic, sometimes we can feel a bit disjointed or dislocated from where we want to be heading to. But maybe there's an opportunity in this. In conferences like this, we can get together and we can ask those hard to ask questions, and we can also network really quickly within a few seconds, reaching out to people either through email, through conference, jumping onto LinkedIn and getting a profile, and making sure that there are resources we listen to that are available to us. So we want some advice from this fantastic panel on how to get ahead, how to cold start a quick start. So panel, I'm going to put this question out to you, and anybody feel free to jump in. What do you recognise about defining a career first up? If we talk about sport integrity, getting involved in sport, we look at SEGA pioneering the space of values, meeting sport, meeting management and leadership. Does anyone want to define that first off and a career in sport integrity and what that means to you? Ed, go for it.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Whilst preparing for this session, normally I'm on the other side of the mic doing interviews, and I was thinking of this question. For me, pursuing a career in the sports industry is a journey, not a job. And I say that because the other guy said, but for me, with my podcast journey, I found in 2015 iTunes, 8 hours later, I was hooked. I had that sort of Christmas feeling, when you're young, it's Christmas Day. I said, this is it. So for me, podcasting is a passion. And I knew it's a place where I can educate people in what it takes to work in the sports industry. So that drove me. That was that defining moment of my podcasting journey. But I never treated my podcast.
Go back and say is, what's your passion? What is it that you're passionate about? And then what are the steps that you can take to just start to talk to people and have that journey? Because as anxious as we are to get started, sometimes we've got to slow that down and find out from others as we take that journey. Oleg, can I ask you this question, just touching on that? This is a journey, and, taking that point that Ed's made, this is a journey, not just a career pathway. How did you get started? How did you remove those barriers? Because you started very young, and yet you've got 2 degrees, and you've been able to maintain a pace and a pathway and build something hugely successful.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for your kind words. I appreciate that. I mean, like for me, it's like, yes, Ed talked about too, and you as well, talking about the passion, right? I knew very early I wanted to work in sports. It was very sort of like natural for me. I always said, like, if I couldn't work in sports, I have no idea what I was going to choose. Like, it was like really, really my option. It was the one thing I really cared so much about. And for me, it was very natural. Like, how do you begin then, right? So for us, it was natural, taking relevant education, finding a program that had that sort of, programs or courses that could enhance my overall goal. And most people, they look at the sport industry and like, I don't know what I want to be, or what way I want to take, but I want to be part of something I'm passionate about. And sports is driven by passion. And for my sake, I always sort of like had this goal from I was 16 that I was going to be, a managing director for a football club. That was my goal. And that was sort of like what I was fighting towards. And as you know, now I started my own company a few years back, and that was never on my plan. And for me, that was sort of like, you always got to have your mindset open about new opportunities, new things coming up. And that's sort of like talking a little bit about the journey, the path that you will experience. And I knew very early as well that I wanted to, try to get as much experiences as I did. So, and it's sort of like having an international and global mindset. So it was natural for me to take my master in the US. So I went to San Francisco, and literally at that point as well, I knew I had to start from scratch. I came into a new country, and I started as a volunteer, built my way as an intern, unpaid intern for like 8 months in San Francisco. That's pretty, crazy stuff, but even for a Norwegian, and then built my way up to a career, and then started my own company. So it's essentially just for me, exploring my options. And like I said, I never thought I was going to start my own company, and here I am. So that's sort of like very short version of my journey, I guess.
That's a fantastic journey. And I think you've struck some chords there. So I'm looking at this wonderfully young panel in front of me. I'm 50. So I look at my history and background. Volunteering is a really important chord you've just struck, because I remember in my career, now I wanted to get into forensics, and then I collided with sport. So I started breaking some ceilings by going out and volunteering. And I remember being turned away from one particular role because of how I look, because I wanted to get into forensic psychology, and then having to overcome the barrier of someone saying I couldn't do something. So I think that's an interesting one, because volunteering itself is an attractive way of trying something out, but also meeting people who open some doorways. Essen, can I take this over to you? Because I think barriers is a really important topic. And I'd like to first acknowledge how successful you are at such an incredibly young age. And I'd like to hear from you how, you've moved those barriers very quickly and open that pathway. So, we could reach out and encourage others to do something of the same.
I think to echo what the other guys have kind of mentioned, that passion side of things, that there's so many different barriers that can be put into place between you as an unemployed person with a passion or a desire to work within sport. But those barriers to your desired goal are, one, people, because ultimately recruiters and other candidates, right? So sport is one of those places where there's a huge amount of supply and a low amount of demand. There's only certain entities that can hire you within the field that you want to do, but there will be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, others that want that same role as you. So ultimately, there's different barriers in that place, but pick your process and trust your process is one of the key things in terms of going from point A to point B. That, okay, if you want to be like Ole mentioned, a CEO or MD of a football club, right? Say that's your goal. To get there, you're not going to be able to go and be your boyhood club's CEO. You will most likely have to start at the bottom, i.e. your local clubs, grassroots clubs, and then work your way to the top. Most people kind of come into sport with the philosophy of, I want to work with so-and-so. And that's actually their core reason, not actually the love or the passion for the game or whatever entity that they want to go and work in. So same way we use it with clients, same way I use it with my own team. I want to know the why. So what is it that makes you want to do this? And if it's money, if it's working with certain players, if it's working with certain clubs or people, whatever it might be, that's a wrong why. And ultimately only a small percentage of people can do that. The large majority of other people are in it because they love something or they're passionate about something. But the ways to remove those barriers are building a process and trusting that process and networking. So you guys have mentioned organizations like SIGA kind of built there to build your network. You've touched upon volunteering already. People who come into it from the get-go saying, okay, I've graduated, I'm now going to go and do this, and I expect X amount of money per year to do this. It's a wrong way of thinking about it, because you have to do things for free. You have to build your trust and you have to build your knowledge. Someone's not going to necessarily pay you for you to find your way in life. And especially in sport, it's the industry that, one, pays the least, and two, likes things for free. So ultimately you have to play the game the way that the game is set out to play, but use it in your own process and use it in your own way to drive to your direction is probably the best way to break down those barriers.
That's a really, really good point. And if I draw that together, you've touched a few chords with me there as I watched this beautiful sunrise start to come up over the beach. I did say to the speakers beforehand I wasn't going to mention that it's sunrise here. One of the things that, you know, you really struck a chord on there is that importance of not expecting that you're suddenly going to land your dream job. And I kind of cast my mind back to the beginnings of my own career and volunteering very young. I also managed a modeling agency, yet I was studying forensics. So I modeled young, managed a modeling agency, studied forensics, graduated with 2 degrees, plus a background in management and a background in media and an ability to work with multiple teams and human resources. But then having volunteered in 7 different environments, I'd networked and met so many people, but I didn't even know what networking was back then, to be honest. I mean, we're talking, you know, 30 plus years ago. So one of the things that I wanted to pick on there was, you know, saying yes to opportunities. Opportunities come up, and what I've heard from each of you is, you know, you've gone out there, you've done things, you haven't taken a sense of entitlement, that's going to happen for me, but you've certainly been go-getting. And one of the other things I wanted to defrag for our audience too is just that sometimes if we do compare ourselves as a one-to-many approach, it can be a bit daunting. And it's all right to have a little bit of fantasy in there and say, look, I do want to work with that person. I do want to go out there and do this. And to know that that drive and passion, which you've all touched upon, is really important. And you could be that next big thing, but without trying to focus on being that, just going out and exploring those opportunities. If you were going to give, say, 5 or 6 tips that landed that beginning of the runway or the pathway to a person starting to move into their career, and this is taking maybe past the studies, or maybe let's pick up on that point of saying yes to opportunities that you've taken that have really paid off for you, and 5 tips that you've gained from those networks. Who'd like to give me a little bit of that?
I'll jump in. It's up to you. Ole, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, no problem at all. I mean, like, I think, of course, like there's a lot of advice like we can give you directly, of course, in your journey here. But I think first and foremost is that to understand that each different is journey, like each journey is different, right? We all have our different kind of paths and goals and ambitions in life, and I think, you know, for someone, you know, young and new in the position that you are now, is first of all, think about what you stand for. You know, we're here with the SIGA Youth Forum. Like, what is your values? What is your personal belief? What is important for you? And try to look for organizations in the sport industry that support those values, because at the end of the day, it's about how you can provide value to that organization, and finding similar organization that thinks in that fashion is very important. And the other thing is, like, as all of you that are part here of the panel, including the moderator, you know, you essentially have been able to utilize the opportunity that has been there. And that's essentially one of the biggest and important thing is you're at this event here. Like, there's a lot of great speakers. There's a lot of great people attending the event. This is a great opportunity to reach out to, you know, maybe speakers, moderators, people that you find interesting, and try to learn from them. You know, be humble, be respectful, show your curiosity and passion, because people can see passion. And when you're looking for a job in the industry, you can spot that easily. And I think it also goes back to, what Essen says about like, okay, why are you here? What's the purpose of you being in the sport industry? And I think that's a key factor. And I guess like my final sort of advice before I'll let anyone else speak here is in this situation where we are now with the pandemic, is now's your opportunity to be open. I know a lot of you guys and girls out there like, okay, I want to work for Barcelona. I want to work for, Twitch or Visa or what it might be. And that's totally fine. But you also got to think about what markets are emerging and taking, are being elevated out of the current situation. Now's the time to explore your options. Think global. There's a lot of remote opportunities being played out of that and maybe even created based on it. And it's essentially comes down to your passion, your interest. And that's sort of like my key advice here.
Love it. That was just fantastic. The world is your oyster. I got that from what you just said there, Euler. It really is. There's just so much there, that warmth that you gave us through just go out there and be yourself, really, is what I'm hearing too. Let your passion speak for you. Don't be afraid. Don't try to find the right words. Just say, hey, I want this. I don't know the right way yet, but show me the way. Ed, jump in there. I know you wanted to.
Yeah, no, sure. I don't want to repeat all I said because his point's really important, but from my experience interviewing 200 experts in the industry, and really doesn't matter what sector you want to work in, what role, what I've seen as a trend is, number one, as I mentioned right at the start, like really know your communication skills. It's not just about emails now, audio messages, video messages, get creative when you reach out. Number two is know what you want and know what you don't want. I learned that from Gilberto Silva when I met him at the Athens Women's Football Summit. That was the secret for him being a professional footballer at Arsenal. He knew that was the club he wanted to play for, and that was his goal. And then the third one, and this was a game changer for me when I started my journey in education sport, is find a mentor in a field with a person who inspires you. For me, it was John Amici. He's got great public speaking skills. He works in sports as a psychologist. When I met him for the first time, I wanted to learn more from him. So I reached out, sent him an email, and it was my third podcast. And I was shaking like a leaf when I interviewed him 5 years ago, but we had some meetings. So have a mentor, because that will support you in the long run. And then the network, without a doubt, build that network. Like there's another phrase I said to myself, the quality of your communication is the quality of your network. And it really does show that. Like these guys have built a great network. I've sort of done my homework on these guys, and I'm like, wow, what they've achieved is amazing. So my fifth one is, I'm going to relate to Ole a little bit, but add value. And I'm going to say how, just from my experience. Content creation. There's no excuses. We're all at home. You can now create an ebook, do live streams. You can do a podcast. You can do blogging. You can do micro posts or graphics on Twitter. Creating content is to help you be a magnet of interest, and then in time be a magnet of influence in the area you want to specialize in. So there's 5 tips from my experience that have helped me really have the opportunity to interview amazing people in the sports industries, which led to clients, which led to projects. And that's why, I'm here today on this panel. So hopefully those help.
Well, there's something fantastic, because John Amici's a friend and he's an amazing person. So, and having had some podcasts with him, he's a great person to talk to. One of the things that I wanted to pick up on that you will nicely warm handshake into what I think Essen can bring to us here is in those 5 points, and I gained this from you as well, Ole, is it's very important for you to be able to define a series of steps, but also to be able to be yourself as you go through, which I touched on before you went in there. Removing those barriers is equally important, and I know I harped on that a little bit earlier, but has anybody hit a stumbling block, and how have you gotten past that? Because I think our audience, although we've got, the pandemic is giving us the opportunity to be in different places in one day. So, for instance, today I'm going into Jamaica right after this, then Miami, then I'm going straight back to PNG, and then I'm back into Brisbane, and then I'm back onto the UK. So you can talk to anybody and you can open out your career pathway. But supposing you get knocked down at some particular point, how do you get up and keep going? As if you had an experience because you've just been so successful of having to jump past a barrier.
Yeah, no, I think, well, everyone has barriers. Everyone has like dips in the road. So you'll never come across one person and they go, yeah, everything from start to finish worked out for me. I think if anyone does say that, they're probably lying because it doesn't exist, right? But the first thing that I've tried to do, but I also get all of our team to do, is fail to learn and learn to fail. So ultimately, at any point in time where there's a dip in the road or you failed at something, failure isn't a negative thing, because ultimately you learn something out of it, and you can't learn unless you make mistakes. So in every situation, if something goes wrong, okay, learn why did it go wrong and how can you make it better? And three, how can you make sure that that doesn't happen again? Ultimately, over the course of a person's career, the mistakes that they made at between 20 and 30, 9 times out of 10, they shouldn't make that 32 and beyond, right? Ultimately, you have to learn from those start points. And if I bring it back to an experience, I think I learned within the first week of trying to run a business and speaking to someone about it, especially when it comes to digital space in sport, when in 2013, 14, it wasn't a thing. People started to tell me, oh, this is a fad, it will die, it won't be around X, Y, and Z. And I used to hear that left, right, and center. So what you have to do from that is learn, okay, why are they saying it? What's kind of causing them to say this? Ultimately, it comes down to they don't understand it. So by overcoming that barriers, teach them. You may not be an authoritative figure in your space, but ultimately you can still bring knowledge that someone else can't. Me now, I'm not Gen Z, I'm not that generation, but there are younger team members who can bring that knowledge to me that I don't have. And albeit I don't want to have, because I don't want to sit on those platforms. So you have to take away a burden from someone if there's a problem. And those problems arise 9 times out of 10 because the other person doesn't understand. And I think coming back to the employability side of things, you're going to hear more no's than you are yeses. That's ultimately fact of life. It's how you take those no's and keep trusting your process. It comes back to, I think so many of us have said it in here, what's your journey? Why are you on that journey? And what is the direction that you're heading in? And trust it to know that, yes, you will get a multitude of no's along those ways, but you need to keep learning and adapting to those no's, that the next time you can take that learning to, why did Ed not hire me? And what will Ole need from me for him to hire me? It's ultimately taking all that learning from other people, but ask the why. So many people, the amount of applications, so we just recently ran a position in, over 500 applicants we had for it. One gets hired, right? I haven't had 400 people come to the emails and say why. They've all just kind of left it. And it's, well, you're not going to learn why we didn't hire you and why we hired that person unless you ask. And those people that do ask, one of them has actually been hired by us again because they asked, why was it that I didn't get that job? Went away, learned from it all, took our feedback, has done all that experience in that space, and now come back with a stronger CV. So now we hired that person. So it's a proofing case that find out why something didn't work and use it and learn from it.
That's a really good point. Sometimes we're a little bit afraid, a little bit anxious. And I know in my particular role as CEO of an athlete mental health company and also working in sports leadership and development and a number of boards, one of the key things is often I see younger board members actually hanging back and not asking that question. So sometimes I'll ask that question of them. The other point is finding a mentor. I think that's equally important. Someone that you can talk to. I know SIG has created this mentoring forum, and we have mentors and mentees globally. And I think sometimes it's not being afraid and also offering the help. If you can see that someone's not going to ask you. What was your journey like in finding a range of mentors? And if you were to give us a couple of tips of who you went looking for or how you went looking for them, what would they be? Ed, you sort of sparked that question off for me. So Ole, I'll come over to you.
Yeah, go on, Ole, go on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like for me, I think, if there's students out there, young professionals that are, as you guys starting their career, then as a student in particular, you're in very, very favorable position because you can utilize that to essentially get informational interviews with a lot of people in the industry. And sort of like gaining that knowledge and hands-on experience from them is a really great starting point for one, getting hands-on insights into what people are doing. Second, building valuable relationships with people in the industry and utilizing that first conversation, that second conversation as a way of, potentially this could be like a mentor for me or mentee. And from my side, just going back even to like when I was working for the Norwegian Football Association, I had the opportunity. I was the only intern at the time at the association, and for me, I had like a weekly dialogue with the general secretary, which happens to be also local. So of course, like that was a nice link. But essentially, we talked about everything, that the challenges that I was facing. And I remember in the beginning, I was like, put in the development department in the association. I said, hey, I want to explore, the entire association. I want to see what's going on. And he said, well, if you want to do that, you just go to all these different departments and you say, hey, what can I do for you? What's the value you can put in? So he essentially pushed me, to like force myself into taking that, responsibility. And at the end of the, internship and the time I was there, I literally had to decline departments coming to me because I had so much of different departments coming in and say, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And again, that was just based on me taking the initiative, being proactive, and then of course getting that push, that guidance. And I did the exact same thing when I started Sporting Global. Even before we officially started, I talked with people and my mentors, and I pitched the concept and I said, hey, what do you think about this? What is your thoughts? How do you think would be the best approach? And several of those people now are sitting in our board of advisors. And that's because I knew like we're going to be a young core team that has to be hungry. We have to be passionate. We have to push the as much as we can. And then you have to have those, people that have been in the industry for a long time that can just hold you back whenever that's necessary, give you a little bit, guidance on the path. And that's going to help you, whether that's an individual or as a company. So that's sort of like why I think this is very important. And start with like, having those conversations with people in the industry. I think that's the number one key advice. And the ones that you feel you have a good connection with, build upon that. Reach out to them again, like in a month or two, and like maybe something new happened with their organization. Utilize that as a way of building that bridge, and then you never know what's going to happen out of it. They might become a mentor, they might become an advisor of you, but nothing happens unless you take that first step, and that's very important.
Fantastic advice. Look, I can only just echo that, and I think I'll turn it over to Ed just to talk and touch on John Amici there. But I can say for our audience, when I was 19, I went round and started asking people what it was that I wanted or needed, because I didn't know exactly where I was going to head to. So I ended up at the age of 40 having a lady walk up to me from an audience and saying, do you remember I mentored you when you first started out? And she was one of the leading practicing partners at KPMG at the time. So, one of the key things is to ask people and to not be afraid. Ed, how did you overcome your idolization fear to go and jump up to John Amici and say, mentor me?
Well, it was straight off the podcast. Literally, I was super excited having my show. And I did a great email where I explained to him, I gave him a cup of tea right over my head. This guy's 6'7". And literally, when I was on my internship, because it was one of the clients, I put this cup of tea, and I said this in the email, and I said it was like doing a 2-pointer. And he said that was the hook of him coming on the show, and then did the podcast. And then I was nervous, and I went, look, John, would you mentor me? And magic words, yes. I literally celebrated because I knew I needed help. And I think this is an important tip. Don't be shy to ask for help. But let me be clear on this. But when I met John, I remember to this day, I had my pinstripe suit, met for a coffee, and John didn't just help me and point me in the right direction. He actually asked me better questions, and that goes to all those points about guidance. He said, okay, great, Ed, you have this idea of this podcast show. I get the reason why you're doing it, to educate people, but where do you want this to go? It can't be like a monthly show. If you want to treat it like a business, you've got to do at least for a month. And I'm like, what? I've done 10. How am I going to do, pretty much 52 a year? And I hit that target every year now. I did 84 last year during 2020, just because we're all at home and people were they had the time. So with John's advice, looking back, I have other mentors now who support me in other areas of my business. Like John doesn't have the expertise in online marketing. So I have another guy called Chris Ducker, because I went to a conference, I invested in him. So that's another key point with a mentor. You've got to invest. You can't just, thankfully, John and Chris haven't charged me for their time, but I paid for the coffees, I paid for the lunches, I paid for their conferences, and they will give the advice or guidance 10 times more than that cup of coffee. So I don't want people to think it's like charity, but treat it like an investment. Treat a mentor as an investment, because it will lead you in the right direction. And yeah, I wouldn't be here without a mentor. Going back to a point earlier, it helps with your mindset. It means I've asked for help, he's calmed me down, and he's given me a better roadmap with targets to try and achieve.
I'm hearing from you, Ed, is I listen to all the advice I'm given and I look for the advisors. I'm really grabbing that point from you. Aston, if I come to you, like, as I said, it's remarkable how young you are and where you started and how composed your career has been. Who mentored you when you headed out, and how did you go looking for that right person? Because media is quite a cutthroat industry, having been involved in that in my history and in my past. And, to get involved, it can look really great on the surface, but you've got to find those right people.
Yeah, no, I think before I answer it, I want to clarify that not everyone's journey is the same, because so me personally, I never had a mentor. There was a few reasons for it personally, because of the type of person I am. I don't tend to listen to people. So I really wanted to make my own mistakes and learn from my own mistakes, coming back to my answer before, right? But if I was to say what was the source of my mentorship, it was podcasts, it was books, it was reading, it was asking people questions that I needed answers for, but not necessarily asking the same person over and over again. I don't know if many people have read the book Outliers, but ultimately the point in time where I was starting out my career was when social media was starting off. Twitter was around, Instagram was around, Facebook was around, but it wasn't commercialized. It wasn't a platform that businesses were really using. It wasn't a platform that many really understood, other than just peer-to-peer, like friend to friend. So in that period of time, the traditional media people didn't understand it. People that were within the industry didn't really understand it. So ultimately there was this new voice coming in talking about this new toy, and everyone didn't really understand it. So for me, I didn't have anyone that I could turn to and ask these questions of or from. So what I did was I turned to, like I always say, the States are 5 years ahead of us in Europe, or especially UK, looking at what the American sports did, because NBA was the first sports to humanize athletes. NFL, again, was the second one to follow it. But looking at the models that they used over there, reading their books, listening to their podcasts, watching YouTube videos around different people and how they brought different things to life. So my mentor was more my own research rather than a person. But then on the flip side to it, I think echoing a lot of what the guys have said, that when we have interns coming in, or when we have new graduates starting their career with us, it's always interesting to see the ones that ask the right questions and the ones that stay quiet. The ones that stay quiet, you tend to know, okay, either they're not passionate about this, or they're sending off the wrong signals, as everyone's kind of mentioning here, asking the right questions, asking the people the right questions. We had one intern literally just go around our office, as Ole mentioned, just asking everyone, oh, so what do you do? Literally, that was her question to everyone. What do you do? Tell me about your job. What do you do in your day-to-day? So being able to ask those questions, it doesn't necessarily mean you just have to have one mentor that helps you and guides you and shows you the way. I've had so many of these mentors now come to say, okay, let me mentor you to grow your business to this. But I personally believe I learn by my own mistakes better than I learn from someone else's experience. But other people can use that experience of someone that they're working with, or that they've just come across, to ask that person doesn't have to be your mentor. You could ask the right questions that you from that person, and then be like, okay, I can make these decisions myself, especially when it comes to making or starting your own business. Or it's quite daunting, and ultimately you have to go with your gut feeling. It's your business. You started it out for a reason. So you have to back yourself to be able to build in the directions that you want, and then use your advice. Like my mentors, if I was to say who are they, they're my close friends. They're the friends that I know that they know the industry, that I know they know my struggle because they're living it as well. And it's sharing those experiences with my friends rather than a mentor that's built a business and sold a business.
I'm hearing loud and clear, find people that you feel safe with who'll encourage you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because having mentored many and also, you know, having mentees, it's very difficult for a mentor to give you every single step, but there's a facilitation that takes place. There's an openness. And I love your opening statement. I don't always listen because I know there's a stubbornness in all of us too when we believe we're going somewhere. And that's okay because that's that gutsiness that gets us someplace. And I really admire that. I've got a bit of that in me myself because I think it takes that to break some ceilings. But the other thing is, and you've really highlighted, and I think it's so important, Essen, is that we have to feel safe. So whether it's your friends or people around you that, you know, are going to encourage you, it's very important to be able to turn around to someone and just be inspired by every day. You may be asking them questions, you may be finding things out about what they do, but you're learning because you become a sponge at that early stage. Also, we've got to ensure our audience doesn't get confused. And I think, you know, if we can draw this together into a number of steps, because, you know, there's another pointer too, is often when we do start our careers out, we're young and we're enthusiastic, and, you know, all of you out there are going to be wanting to head someplace. Try not to be confused. It's almost like going into a smorgasbord and picking the things that you want. And I'm getting that very strongly from each of our really esteemed speakers, that we need to be able to pick out those elements of things that reflect our values, that reflect what it is that we think we're going to be doing. Say yes to some doorways, surround ourselves with people that we feel safe with, take some risks and opportunities, be willing to invest, whether it's investing in a cup of tea or investing your time, working a little bit harder because it's not going to arrive at your doorstep if you're waiting for it to arrive, being quite open, taking those risks, but also, you know, being composed about that way forward, a little bit organized, willing to make mistakes and overcome those things that can look like barriers that might be really stumbling blocks that go into stepping stones for you, because those stepping stones can lead you someplace pretty fantastic. So if we were to leave our audience today with some real encouragers in this pandemic, and I loved hearing the word books in there, because in an area that I've come from, that's really where I started to get inspired, was reading books, talking to people. If you were to say in closing today, here are some things to our audience that I passionately want you to pick up and do when you leave this event today, what would they be? Give me 3 things they can walk away and do. In our closing statement.
For me, research is the most important thing. That everyone can be confused in a direction that they want to go in, but unless you research and actually find out what it is to be in that field, or what it might be like to work as that person, or whatever it might be, again, coming back to the books, the podcasts at the moment, like Ed will be the prime example for it, interviewing people that are in that industry that you want to be working in, learn from them, listen to them, see what they're saying, see what they're experiencing, the positives, the negatives, and use all that research to be able to make your own decisions. And then I think Ale kind of mentioned, bring a value. What value are you bringing to the table, and really understand that value. But the amount of times I hear certain values and they're quite, I'm organized, I'm this, they're not value, they're just basic necessities that are needed in a workplace, right? What is your value that you are bringing to that organization? But that can come through your research. Okay, they do this, I can do this, equals my value is this. So very much understanding the value. And then I think coming back to my other point was staying positives and learning from those mistakes. If you don't learn, you're never going to grow.
Fantastic. So launching into sport and sport integrity, working in sport management, leadership, getting to know the people that you need to know. What are your 3 tips, Ole?
I mean, like, of course, like there's some great advice Essen's already touched upon, and I think, you know, building upon that is understanding what you stand for. I mean, like, not only just the values, but what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, working a little bit, sort of like building a game plan, I think it's also like good to have, like maybe set some goal, like some milestone within the next year. I want to attend this conference. I want to attend like this, seminar. I want to speak with this and this people. I want to have this job opportunity by the end of this year. Like build sort of like a game plan. And the third thing is essentially, have that, just open up, just I know a lot of you are so focused on, that club or that organization, but now in the pandemic, I can't emphasize this enough. Like, explore your options and look, again, tying into the research, look for the markets, the sectors that are excelling in the current situation, because that's where it is opportunity, and that's the opportunity you need to grab.
Fantastic. Ed, over to you. 3 tips.
Wow, there's been some great ones already. I'll try and be different. I'm going to relate to Essen's point, back yourself. So meaning your confidence. We're all at home. Confidence is so precious. And that really does showcase who you are when you promote yourself online in particularly. So really protect your enthusiasm, use it as a weapon when showcasing yourself. So that's sort of 1/2. But there's a quote here that I relate to with Michael Caine, a British actor. He said this in one of his interviews, giving advice to other actors. And he says, I don't give advice because due to so much information we receive every day on social media, it can be very worthless, but unless you take action. So if it's cool with you, without a tip, people are watching live, there's been bags of advice during this session. Pick your 3 and how you're going to take action. I want to finish with an exercise because I think we've spoken on so many different topics. Pick the 3 best advice you've heard and put them in the action, because Tony Robbins said, results come from action, not from discussion. We've discussed it now with you guys. Now you've got to put it into practice.
Love it. So audience, one of the things I'm going to tie us up with today is carrying on from those tools and exercise and those wonderful tidbits from Ole, Essen and Ed. I'm going to encourage you to walk away from today and go design your own business card. I've done this with teenagers, with business people, with people starting out, people who are looking for careers. Design your business card, grab 3 tips, grab a quote or a saying that you really believe in that inspires you, throw it on the back. On the front, grab 3 values that you stand for, and ensure that, if you're going to give yourself a title, just say Chief Adventurer. I think that one of the most impressive titles I ever saw was from Edward de Bono, who's a bit like a second father to me, and he put on King of his own island. It's really important to have a bit of humor and a sense of humor when you go out there. Finding your ideal career is really about reaching out and giving people a warm handshake. You've heard from media, you've heard from recruitment, you've heard from, that going out there and ensuring that you can be who you want to be is about finding a mentor and ensuring that you also don't not believe in yourself. Surround yourself with people that you can reflect to. This has been finding your ideal career and knowing that in the pandemic, you can do anything that you want to do. There are no limitations. Take the design, take the facets from today, take the tips from today, put them down and ensure that you do something with them. Reach out to each of these wonderful people. Know that Seeger is a place that you can go to for forums, for advice, for mentoring, and be able to be available to everything that comes towards you. Say yes to opportunities. Know that if you were to feel inspired, that you're your greatest inspiration. So when you look out the window each day, make sure you pick up on 3 things that you think, I'm lucky to have this and I'm grateful to have this. So those are those elements that'll keep you going, keep you searching, but also keep you moving towards the great people that you've seen today. Ole, Ed, Essen, it has been fantastic. I have loved this. We could have talked for at least another hour. We've got 30 seconds to wave our goodbyes to this wonderful audience out there. Please, while you're at Seeger, while you're in this incredible forum, in the midst of a pandemic, which may be presenting you with the biggest opportunity of your life, reach out to these fabulous people. Make sure that you grab hold of their advice and grab hold of them before much of the conference passes and we go into night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.